If you ask any Doctor Who fan for examples of excellent classic Doctor Who stories, you'll always hear people citing Genesis of the Daleks. At this point, it's difficult to say anything about this story that hasn't already been said. This episode is a masterpiece from start to finish. It makes perfect use of its setting and characters, the sound design is excellent, and it manages to transcend the budgetary limitations of classic Doctor Who, as it still holds up as a chilling visual depiction of a world ruined by nuclear war. It is interesting watching Genesis of the Daleks as its own separate entity, removed from the wider lore of the Daleks and Davros that come before and after it. The idea of a deranged scientist expending the last resources of his dying race to ensure that they evolve into twisted, merciless killers is a fantastic idea that is executed really well in this episode, thanks to the stunning performance from Michael Wisher, who had previously provided Dalek voices for the show and does a great performance as Davros. The stark imagery of the shiny, clean Daleks traversing the tattered landscape, picking off the last vestiges of the Khaled and Thal civilizations, is striking and memorable, and the episode carries the Gothic themes and elements that are prevalent throughout Season 12. The twisted figure of Davros is like a vampire holed up in his brutalist castle separate from civilization, surrounded by pale-skinned thralls who do his every bidding. There are creatures in his dungeon, he siphons materials from ordinary people and constructs monstrous golems made in his own image. His creatures are made from the same flesh and blood as the people, but they are perverted and putrefied by Davros's hate. When the squabbling townsfolk rally at his gate, he unleashes his creations on them and eventually seals the fate of every living thing on the planet, including himself, as his creations turn their fire on anything that is not like them. It has to be said that the Daleks themselves don't play as big of a role on screen in Genesis of the Daleks as they do in some of the other excellent Dalek stories of the classic era, like The Power of the Daleks. Instead, the presence of the Daleks is felt throughout the story as an inevitability, and Davros himself talks and acts much like a Dalek, particularly when he's agitated, showing just how much of himself he put into his creations. In this way, Davros almost acts as a stand-in for the Daleks for much of this story, as he speaks for them and aims to ensure their survival no matter what. But when the Daleks appear at the climax of the story, fully formed and ready to unleash death, they quickly take their place as the supreme beings of Skaro, and as we already know from all the Dalek stories from the 60s and 70s leading up to Genesis, their ambition soon turns to universal domination. At the heart of Genesis of the Daleks is Tom Baker, Elizabeth Sladen and Ian Marter, who play the Fourth Doctor, Sarah Jane and Harry respectively. This is by far one of my favourite TARDIS teams. The trio play off each other so well, with the Doctor's witty barbs, Harry's earnest curiosity, and Sarah's brave and forward-thinking mentality all pushing the story forward, even if they're separated. Despite being 6 parts, Genesis of the Daleks doesn't feel that long because of how well paced it is for a classic Who story. Another standout character is Nyder, Davros' right-hand man. This guy is the best humanoid representation of a Dalek you could find. Fiercely loyal to authority, ruthless and efficient, and instinctively manipulative, deceitful and conniving. He's just one of a wide cast of interesting characters, both Khaled and Thal, that really humanises the last days of humanoid civilization on Skaro before the Daleks take control. Overall, Genesis of the Daleks is a shining example of a great Dalek story. What do you think of Genesis of the Daleks? Let me know in the comments below.